I'm going to run through a series of slides here to try to show the process I use to arrive at. Really, there's a couple different solutions for beams in this room. And some of these photos are going to be probably not understandable, but I'll try to explain as I go along. Thought of just deleting a bunch of them, but you ought to know how or why we got to where we got. I began with, these are all 7-inch wide beams. The main beam is 9 inches wide. The ones coming down the slope are only 5 inches high because of the angle and how they have to interface with this beam, and these ones are 7 inches high. This was the very first quick layout here with the 7-inch beams, one centered on this door and the rest spaced evenly. You can see this results in a number of issues, a space up behind this one and a space up behind this one, which really isn't the end of the world. Maybe lighting can go in there or something like this. But so this is that setup where everything's spaced evenly, about 6 foot between each one. And you can see here's the gap up behind that one, and behind this one, and behind this one. And yeah, see, there's the wall and the gap behind it. And so if we push the margin beam, obviously we'll push that one out, which means we can space these ones out a little further. And now all of these gaps are 5, 8.5 between all of these, but we're left with an orphan space up in here, and a similar orphan space behind that wall that's behind the kitchen. Now these next several are just making some adjustments to the actual assembly, or whatever you want to call it. These were just taking a look at the thing, coming around here, and then start to make some adjustments, pushing those beams where there's only a half beam or so, resizing some things, putting some margins in. I don't think we want these dying straight into the drywall, so that's what I was thinking might be necessary. And we come back, and then these are really the only two viable options that I see. With these 7.5 inch, 5.5 inch high beams coming down with a 6'0" symmetrical spacing, except at the margins. This one's pushed out where there's 1.25 inches here. You do end up with this gap, though, up behind that wall. This is the line of the kitchen wall here, so you end up with a gap behind here. Another alternative is to make those beams, instead of 7.5 inches wide, make them only 5.5 inches wide and by 5.5 tall, and then add one, and then your spacing is as shown. Again, we still have a gap behind this wall. That was the first one, the 6 foot wide spacing, and trying to push those out to get rid of that gap at this wall. The spacing is so crazy that it would be very obvious and should not be done. So perhaps this is the only viable alternative, is this many with that spacing. Now what was nice about this one was that all the spacing was even, and this one was about centered on this dining room window, but there is that gap up in here. And you can pick this up right away. This is not a viable alternative. It was just a demonstration. All the even spacing, these gaps are okay because this is just okay up here. It's wide enough to be okay on both of those. But there's a little asymmetry at the dining room window. And maybe that's just ignored. But here is the one with the extra beams that are a little more narrow. And obviously the finish of these beams is going to impact the feel and the look. But this was the larger beam, that has, I guess, 1, 2, 3, 4 main beams, 7.5 inch wide, different exposure. The same thing. These are all the 6'1" spacing. There's about a 7-inch gap up behind this one. I'm not showing a margin here, and that should probably be there. I don't know how that's dealt with. Probably this is adding that extra beam making them 5.5 inches wide instead. All even spacing. So that was really about where I got with this. So anything I can do to help make it a little more clear, just let me know. Thanks.